It was past 3 in the morning. London was frozen. Diana pulled a blanket over herself in the back seat, slid down low, and told the driver to go. No cameras, no staff, no announcement. The most photographed woman in the world was going somewhere, and she needed no one to know she was there. What she did on those winter nights wasn't in any official schedule. It wasn't organized by the palace, approved by any committee, or cleared by her press team. It was entirely hers. There was a young man named Ricky sleeping in a shelter that night. He was 23 years old. He hated the royal family. And Diana was walking straight toward him, remembering exactly who he was. Ladies, what you are about to hear is not a story about charity. It is a story about a woman who chose to be a guardian, invisible, quiet, and more powerful than anyone inside those palace walls ever understood. And the system she was hiding from? It was the very same system that was supposed to protect her. Let me take you back to 1994. Britain was in the middle of one of its coldest winters in years. The streets of London at night were brutal, dark, wet, and silent, in a way that only winter can make a city feel completely empty. But they were not empty. Thousands of men and women were sleeping in doorways, under bridges, in shelters that were never quite warm enough and never quite full enough to hold everyone who needed a place to be. The British government had programs. There were committees. There were official reports. There were press conferences about the homeless crisis in London. And Diana watched all of it from behind palace windows and thought, this is not enough. Because what those programs didn't have was a face, a real human being willing to sit down next to someone the world had forgotten and say, I see you. I know your name. You matter. The palace had rules about that kind of thing. You did not simply go places without security clearance, without coordination, without a schedule approved weeks in advance. You did not show up unannounced in the middle of the night to places that were not on the official itinerary. And you certainly did not do it alone, covered in a blanket in the back seat of a car, hoping no photographer was following you through the dark. But Diana did. And here's what breaks my heart every time I think about this, ladies. She had to hide to do it. The most caring woman in that entire royal institution had to sneak out like she was doing something wrong just to go and hold the hand of someone who was suffering. She didn't need approval to feel compassion, but she needed to disappear to act on it. Stay with me, because what happened inside that shelter the night Diana walked in and found Ricky is something that will change the way you see her forever. Before we go any further, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop your city or your country in the comments right now. I read every single one, and it means the world to me to know that this community is spread all around the globe. We are everywhere, and Diana would have loved that. Darren McGrady worked in the kitchens of Kensington Palace for 15 years. He cooked for the Queen. He cooked for Charles. And for years, he cooked for Diana. He knew her schedule, her habits, her preferences, and her silences. He was one of the people who saw the version of Diana that the cameras never reached. And years after her death, he said something that stopped me completely the first time I heard it. He said that Diana would go out at night, late at night, and place coats and warm things inside trash cans near the places where homeless people slept. She did it so that the people who found those things would not know where they came from. She did not leave a note. She did not tell anyone. She just went, left what she had, and came back before the palace noticed she was gone. Think about that for one moment. This was a woman whose face was on the front page of every newspaper in the world. A woman who could not walk into a grocery store without causing a scene. A woman who had photographers hiding in bushes outside her window, following her car through tunnels, waiting for her on every corner of every street she walked. And she still found a way to disappear into the dark and do something that nobody would ever see. Because for Diana, being seen was never the point. Now, I have to stop here for just a second and tell you something personal, ladies. Because this is the part of her story that gets me every single time. And I mean every time. I think about the woman I was in my 20s, and I think about how much I needed to be validated, how much I needed people to see what I was doing, to acknowledge it, to tell me it mattered. And then I look at Diana, who was one of the most famous human beings alive. And she was out there at 3 a.m, hiding under a blanket, doing good things that she prayed no one would ever find out about. That is not celebrity. That is not performance. That is character. And I think that word, character, is the one that defines her more than any title ever could. She became the patron of Centrepoint in 1992. Centrepoint was one of the most important charities for young homeless people in Britain, a place that provided shelter, support, and a path back to a normal life for men and women who had fallen completely through every crack the system had. Diana didn't just lend them her name. She showed up. She walked the halls. She sat with people. She asked questions and listened to the answers. She did not perform presence. She gave presence. But the palace was not comfortable with the way she did it. Official visits had protocols. They had press releases and approved photo opportunities and carefully managed narratives. Diana's visits were none of those things. She would call ahead with little notice. She would arrive without a full security team. She would stay longer than the schedule allowed and leave later than anyone expected. She moved through those spaces like she belonged there, which, in every way that mattered, she did. And so, she started going alone, or as close to alone as a princess could get. She would switch cars mid-route to shake the photographers. She would use back entrances. She would sit low in the back seat with something pulled over her, a coat, a blanket, whatever she had. And she would ride through the frozen streets of London in the middle of the night toward places the palace had not approved, to see people the system had not noticed. She was a guardian, and she was determined to stay hidden, until the night she walked into that shelter and stood in front of a 23-year-old man who wanted nothing to do with her. And what happened in that room is something that the man who witnessed it said he would carry for the rest of his life. Paul George had seen a lot of things in his years as a social worker. He had seen people at their lowest, men and women who had lost everything, who had stopped believing that anyone outside those shelter walls would ever look at them again. He was used to the quiet desperation of those spaces. He was used to the cold that came through the walls no matter how many heaters you ran. He was used to the kind of silence that settles over a room full of people who have nowhere else to go. He was not used to what happened on that winter night in 1994. Diana came in through a side entrance. There was no announcement. There was no photographer. There was no press coordinator standing near the door with a list of approved talking points. She walked in wearing simple clothes, no crown, no jewelry worth noting, nothing that would separate her from any other woman who had come to volunteer at a shelter on a cold night in London. Except that everyone in that room knew exactly who she was, and the room changed the moment she entered it. Most of the young men there looked up. Some of them shifted in their seats. A few moved toward her with the cautious curiosity of people who have been invisible for so long that a kind face feels almost dangerous. Diana smiled at them. She spoke quietly. She moved through the room without rushing, the way she always moved through those spaces, as if she had all the time in the world and there was nowhere on earth she would rather be. And then she stopped. Paul George watched her scan the room and then walk, deliberately, without hesitation, toward one specific person, a young man sitting apart from the others. His name was Ricky. He was 23 years old, and he had made it clear, more than once to the people at that shelter, that he did not think the royal family had any business existing at all. He had no interest in Diana. He had no warmth for what she represented. He was sitting with his arms crossed and the particular stillness of someone who has decided, long before you arrive, that you are not going to reach him. Diana walked straight to him. She did not approach him the way a princess approaches a subject. She did not stand above him waiting for deference. She sat down close to him, close the way a friend sits, not the way an institution sits, and she said his name. She called him Ricky, and then she asked him something that Paul George would remember for the rest of his life. She asked if it hadn't been Ricky who used to sleep on the Strand, naming the specific stretch of London Street where he had spent nights before the shelter took him in. She remembered. She had met him once before, briefly in passing, and she had remembered his name, remembered his face, remembered where he had been. Ricky looked at her, and something in that young man, that 23-year-old who hated the royal family and had decided no one from that world would ever see him, something in him simply gave way. Paul George said it was one of the most powerful things he had ever witnessed. Not because Diana said anything extraordinary, not because she made a speech or a promise or a gesture that anyone would photograph, but because she knew his name. Because she looked at him like he was the most important person in that room, in that city, in that moment. And for a man who had been treated by the world as if he did not exist, that was not a small thing. That was everything. Ladies, I need you to sit with this one for a moment, because I think this is the part of Diana's story that explains everything else. It is so easy to write a check. It is so easy to show up for a photo and shake hands and smile and leave. It is so much harder, so much more demanding to actually learn someone's name, to remember it, to carry it with you through the cold and the dark and the back roads of a city that doesn't know where you are, and then walk through a door and make one person feel like they are not invisible. That is what she did. That is what she was. She didn't have a camera. She didn't have a press release. She didn't have palace approval. She had a name, Ricky, and the decision to use it. And that decision, in that shelter, on that frozen night in 1994, changed a young man who had decided the world didn't care about him. But Ricky was not the only one, not even close. Because Diana was doing this across London, in multiple shelters, on multiple nights, and there was another young man she found on a sidewalk, shaking from the cold, who would carry what she did for him for the rest of his life. Vincent Seabrook was 27 years old, and he was shaking. It was a winter night in London. He had no coat warm enough for that kind of cold. He had no food. He had no plan for where he was going to sleep. He was sitting on a sidewalk, one of thousands of people that night who had simply fallen through every safety net the city had to offer. And he was not expecting anything, not help, not conversation, not a single person to stop and look at him like he was worth stopping for. A car pulled up. A woman stepped out. She crouched down beside him on that sidewalk, not standing above him, not reaching down from a distance, but physically lowering herself to his level the way you do when you want someone to know that you are not above them. She gave him something warm to eat. She spoke to him. And then she gave him the number for Centrepoint and told him to call. He called, he got help, he got back on his feet. And years later, Vincent Seabrook had a job, working as a security guard. A man who had been invisible on a London sidewalk, shaking from the cold, now had a life, a real one. Because a woman in a car had stopped when she didn't have to, crouched down when protocol said, "Stand tall," and given him a number when the easiest thing in the world would have been to drive past. That woman was Diana. And Vincent never forgot it, not for a single day. What Diana understood, what she had understood for years by that point, was that the crisis of homelessness in Britain was not a policy problem at its core. It was a visibility problem. The men and women sleeping on those streets were not invisible because they were hard to find. They were invisible because people had decided, consciously or not to see them, to look away, to cross the street, to feel vaguely guilty for a moment and then keep walking. The system had not failed them by accident. It had failed them because it had never truly looked at them in the first place. Diana looked. That was her rebellion. That was the thing the palace could not schedule, could not control, and could not take away from her. She simply refused to look away. And she was determined to pass that refusal on. In December of 1993, just 1 year before the night she walked into that shelter and found Ricky, Diana had taken 2 young princes with her to a place called The Passage. It was a homeless shelter in the heart of London, not far from Westminster. She brought William, who was 11 years old, and Harry, who was 9. She did not bring a camera crew. She did not organize the visit as a lesson in royal duties or a carefully staged moment of public relations. She brought her sons there because she wanted them to see. She wanted them to understand before the world got to them, before the palace shaped them into something formal and distant, that the men and women in that shelter were not problems to be managed. They were people to be known. Prince William has spoken about that visit in the years since. He has said that it opened his eyes in a way that nothing else could have. That walking through those halls as a child, meeting those people face to face, understanding that a warm meal and a safe bed were not things every human being could count on. It stayed with him. It shaped him. It became part of the foundation of everything he has tried to do since. That was Diana's doing. That was the guardian, making sure the next generation would not look away either. And all of this, the nighttime runs through London, the coats left in trash cans, the names remembered, the sidewalks crouched on, the children brought to places most parents would have shielded them from. All of it was happening while the palace maintained its official distance. While committees met and protocols were observed and press releases were approved. While the institution moved at the pace of institutions, slow, careful, managed, and fundamentally concerned with appearance, Diana moved at the pace of a human being who understood that suffering does not wait for committee approval. But there is one more piece of this story that I haven't told you yet. One detail about what Diana was truly risking every time she disappeared into those winter nights, and what it tells us about the kind of woman she actually was underneath every title, every dress, and every carefully managed public moment. Every time Diana left Kensington Palace in the middle of the night, she was taking a risk that most people have never had to calculate. Not a physical risk, though those roads were dark and those neighborhoods were unfamiliar, and there were always photographers somewhere, waiting. The risk she was taking was deeper than that. She was risking the only thing the palace had left to threaten her with: her reputation, her standing, the carefully maintained image of a woman who operated within the rules, who accepted the boundaries, who did not embarrass the institution by going places it had not approved, because that is how the system worked. It did not need to lock a door to keep her inside. It just needed her to believe that stepping outside would cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. And for years, for most of her marriage, for most of her public life, Diana had believed that. She had stayed within the lines. She had smiled for the photographs. She had attended the events and worn the appropriate clothes and said the appropriate things, and slowly, quietly, felt herself disappearing inside a life that looked magnificent from the outside and felt like suffocation from within. But somewhere along the way, and I believe it happened gradually, the way the most important changes in a person always do, Diana made a decision. She decided that if the institution was going to define her, she would define it right back. Not with a press conference, not with a statement, not with a dramatic gesture that anyone would notice. She would define it by simply being in the dark, where no one was watching, the woman she had always known herself to be. And so, she pulled a blanket over herself in the back seat of a car. And she went, "Ladies, I have been telling Diana's story for a long time now. I have cried over her photographs. I have stayed up past midnight, reading accounts of her life that left me unable to sleep. I have felt angry on her behalf, and heartbroken on her behalf, and proud, so proud, on her behalf more times than I can count. But this part of her story, this part, the blanket, the dark streets, the names she carried with her, the coats left in trash cans so that no one would know where they came from. This is the part that makes me understand, completely and without question, why the world has never stopped loving her. Because she was not performing goodness. She was living it. At 3 a.m, in a city that couldn't see her. For people the system had decided were not worth seeing. She was the most photographed woman on earth, and her most important moments happened when there was no photograph to take. Ricky is a name she carried through the cold. Vincent is a life she changed on a sidewalk. Paul George is a witness who never forgot what he saw. Darren McGrady is a man who worked beside her for 15 years, and still, decades later, speaks about her with something that sounds less like professional admiration and more like grief. The grief of someone who watched something rare and irreplaceable walk through the world and then leave it far too soon. Diana did not fix the homelessness crisis in Britain. She knew she couldn't. She was one woman with a blanket and a car and a memory full of names. But she understood something that committees and policy papers and official initiatives have never quite managed to capture: that the deepest wound of poverty is not the cold. It is the invisibility. It is the feeling that the world has looked at you and decided you are not there. And she showed up again and again and again in the dark to prove that feeling wrong. That was her power, not the crown, not the title, not the dress or the wave or the carefully managed public image that the palace spent years trying to maintain. Her power was the willingness to crouch down on a cold London sidewalk, look a suffering human being in the eyes, and say, with every part of who she was, "I see you, and I am not going anywhere." We will never see another like her. And I truly believe, that the reason this community keeps coming back, keeps watching, keeps sharing her story with people we love, is because somewhere deep down, we all know what she gave the world. And we are not ready to let it go. We are never going to be ready to let it go. If this story moved you, and I hope with everything I have that it did, please leave a comment below and tell me, is there someone in your own life who made you feel truly seen, the way Diana made Ricky feel seen that night? Someone who remembered your name when they didn't have to? Someone who stopped when the whole world kept walking? Tell me about them. I want to read every single word. And I want the people in this community to read them too, because that is how we keep this going. That is how we honor what she started. If you are new here, please subscribe, because there are so many more stories where this one came from. Stories that will make you cry and make you proud and make you remember why Diana was, and always will be, the people's princess. Share this video with someone who loves her, with someone who needs to be reminded that one person in the right moment can change everything. And Diana, wherever you are, thank you for the names you remembered, for the sidewalks you crouched on, for the blanket in the back seat, for every frozen London street you drove through in the middle of the night, doing good that no one was ever supposed to see. We saw it. We will always see it. And we will never stop telling your story.